What cultural celebration is more religious than Halloween? I said what I said. I'll back it up, don't worry. So a quick history lesson, okay? Halloween's origins date back over 2,000 years ago to the Celtic festival of Samhain. Every year on November 1st, the ancient Celts celebrated the turning of their new year, the day which marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of the dark, cold winter, a time of year that was often associated with sleep and death. Celts believed that on the night before the new year, the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead became blurred. And so on the night of October 31st, they celebrated Samhain, when it was believed that the ghosts of the dead returned to earth. Subsequently, the Celts developed rites and rituals reflecting their beliefs, some to honor the dead, others to seek protection for the winter ahead. It's all quite fascinating and, frankly, very religious. By 43 AD, the Roman Empire had conquered the majority of Celtic territory. In the course of 400 years that they ruled the Celtic lands, most of the Celtic festivals were merged with Roman ones, including Samhain, which was merged with Feralia, a day in late October when the Romans traditionally commemorated the passing of the dead. Again, a very religious celebration and commemoration. On May 13th, 609 AD, Pope Boniface IV dedicated the Pantheon in Rome in honor of all the Christian martyrs. And the Catholic feast of All Martyrs' Day was established in the Western Church. Pope Gregory III later expanded the festival to include All Saints, in addition to the martyrs, and moved the observance from May 13th to November 1st. And this ought to start sounding familiar to you, and quite religious. By the 9th century, the influence of Christianity had spread into the Celtic lands, where it gradually blended with and supplanted older Celtic rites. It's widely believed today that the Church simply replaced the Celtic Festival of the Dead with a related church-sanctioned holiday. All Souls' Day was celebrated similarly to Samhain, with big bonfires, parades, and dressing up in costumes. Yes, the church. The All Saints' Day celebration was also called All Hallows, as in all holy. And the night before it, the traditional night of Samhain in the Celtic religion, began to be called All Hallows' Eve, and eventually Halloween. So let me ask again, what cultural celebration is more religious than Halloween? I'd like to compare that to Mother's Day and Father's Day, which are both only about 100 years old and have no roots in religious practice. Compare it to national holidays and times of recognition, again, with no roots in any sacred text or history. My point, friends, is simply that Halloween really ought not to be a taboo topic in the church. In fact, it predates us, and it has always been a religious festival. Here's where I think we get hung up. When Halloween and All Saints made their way across the pond, they took on a very different feel and purpose. Over the last 100 years, like so many other things, the celebration became a commercialized thing. Bonfire stories of martyrs and saints were traded in for scary ghost stories and haunted houses. Costumes and parties, gatherings and feasts became more and more garish. Hollywood got a hold of it, and there went the neighborhood. What started as a recognition that with the changing of the seasons comes a thin place in the veil between here and eternity. What began as a remembering of our ancestors and the martyrs of the faith, what once held a special place in our lives and our traditions of not taking life for granted, but also not fearing death, all became co-opted by the machine of commercialization. But at its roots, All Hallows Eve and All Saints' Day are deeply, profoundly religious times. So our hesitation to mention Halloween, our concern about dressing up, it comes from the bastardization version of the day. The dark, creepy, scary stuff, the glorification of gore. There's no place for that here. No place for the idolization of the grotesque for the mere entertainment of it all. But that's not what Halloween was ever supposed to be about. That was taken from us. Samhain was about the thin veil between here and there. It points to eternity. And I would argue from my position here that it points to God. God who is the God of life and death and resurrection. God who chooses to plant seeds of the infinite kingdom of life and love and grace in the hearts and minds of finite human beings. We celebrate All Saints' Day in the church because we know that the God of life has promised that those who have found their eternal rest in the Lord are not sleeping on the job, but have been given a renewed purpose as part of a great cloud of witnesses, a holy cheerleading squad, if you will, surrounding us all, encouraging us and spurring us on as we run the race of faith. All around us, right now, wherever you are the men and women who have gone before us in the faith. You can call them ghosts if you want. Sounds spookier if you say it like that. But it's gospel truth that the saints, the believers who have touched our lives, who helped build this church, who eased the suffering of the people in this community and around the world, they are all around us. That great cloud, that great gathering of witnesses, of believers, of saints, they are always present. And so when we recognize this holy day, we do so with a spirit of gratitude for those who have run the race before us. When we recognize this holy day, we do so with a spirit of dedication, that we will run the next leg of the race with all our hearts and minds. And when we recognize this holy day, we do so with a spirit of faith and trust and hope that one day, when we shuffle off this mortal coil, we too will join that great cloud of witnesses so that we can serve God by cheering on the next generation of believers. That's what this is actually all about. What's more religious than Halloween? I'll wait. Well, you might counter, and that's fair, preacher, nowadays Halloween is a pretty dark thing. Surely we are meant to focus on the light. Well, tell me about this dark. Describe it to me, because I don't think we're actually supposed to be afraid. This past week I preached at the funeral of a dear saint who is now among the great cloud of witnesses. And at that service I shared my favorite piece of scripture, Psalm 139. The NRSV titles this psalm, "The Inescapable God." Beginning at verse 7, the psalmist writes, "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say surely," listen, "if I say surely the darkness shall cover me, and and the light around me become night. Even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. And it got me to thinking again about how darkness is not a deterrent to God. Darkness is not even abhorrent to God, because God is present even in the dark. The dark is as light to God. There is no difference. When King Solomon was dedicating the first temple, after the Ark of the Covenant had been installed in the inner sanctum, and after the priests had vacated the space and the holy cloud of God's presence filled the temple, this is what Solomon said. In verse 12, the Lord has said that he would dwell in thick darkness. Why would God choose to dwell in thick darkness? I can only venture to guess, but I think it's because darkness is not a place of fear to God, and perhaps knowing that, and knowing that God dwells even in thick darkness, can serve as an encouragement to us when we find ourselves in dark places. The dark of the night, or the dark of our minds, or the dark of diagnosis, or the dark of a failed relationship, or the dark of a mounting debt load. Those are some dark places. But surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night, yet even the darkness is not dark to you, O God. The night is as bright as the day, for the darkness is as light to you. Church, I think we can take back some of this festival. We can reclaim the recognition of our connection and gratitude for those who have died in the faith and celebrate that we yet live. We can reclaim the promise that one day we too will join the ranks of the saints who will be spurring on future generations of the faithful. And we can reclaim the dark, the changing of the seasons, the end of the harvest, the sleeping of our soil, the return of the cold. God dwells even in thick darkness, like the tomb, a place of darkness and death, becoming the grand revealing of resurrection and new life. You cannot have Easter without Good Friday. Darkness is not dark to God. One final thought on all of this. I've started listening to a book with my girls. It was gifted to us by a dear friend who heard the author speak recently. The book is called Comfort in the Darkness, and it's designed to help children draw close to God through biblical stories of nighttime and sleep. Again, where was that when I was a kid? The very first story in the book is about creation, and Rachel Turner, the author, reminds us that just as God created the light, God also created the dark and kept both, because both are necessary. Necessary for the marking of time and for rest. God saw both the day and the night and declared that both were good. God is the light of the world, but God also chooses to dwell in thick darkness. Surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night. Even the darkness is not dark to you, O God. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. Look, I didn't start out this week thinking that I was going to preach on Halloween. I didn't think I would ever preach on Halloween. Seems kind of weird, actually. I think my inbox will be disabled for the next 7 days. This is particularly strange for someone who has PTSD from Michael Jackson's Thriller music video, has never entered a haunted house and has no intention to, and refuses to watch horror movies. Sorry, Brian. I can't even tolerate the opening credit music for the X-Files. So do not mistake my message today as advocating for a big Hollywood grotesque Halloween party. That ain't it, and I'm not coming. Instead, I think I'm just inviting you to consider that there is something we have lost as a religious body over the years. Something that has been ours, in our bones, for millennia. A recognition that God is God and we are connected to God and to each other, and that connection, that love and encouragement, it breaks through the thin veil of life and eternity. This is a touching time, a touching place, a time of harvest and gratitude and preparation for the winter season, but also the winter of life. Later in this service, when we recognize the saints who have gone before us in this past year, we can remember that we stand in a lineage of faith that stretches back all the way back even to Solomon and his father David. It stretches back to Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and Leah and Rachel, all the way back up through the prophets and then the disciples themselves and the early church and the Reformation and up to today. We are part of a congregation that is almost 200 years old, and by colonized Canadian standards, that is a long time. This pandemic is not going to be the end of Knox Oakville, and so the legacy continues up through us, through our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and those saints who have yet to join the community of faith. That's what this celebration is about the God of life and resurrection and promises of fellowship and community on both sides of eternity. And it's okay to recognize in moments like this how thin the veil really is. So consider this permission from the pulpit to reclaim All Hallows Eve tonight. And like me, you might have kiddos just wanting to get dressed up and go trick-or-treating. That's fine. That part of the newer aspect of the celebration isn't so bad. It's kind of cute, actually. We have a couple dressed up here this morning. I think, is it a zebra and Minnie Mouse? It's good, it's excellent. I have a unicorn and a sloth doing the rounds from my house tonight. But what I mean is maybe really take time tonight and tomorrow to sit in the dark and remember that God is there. Light a candle and remember. Remember those who have gone before you in the faith, perhaps a relative, a friend, a leader, a teacher. Give thanks to God for shining the light of the kingdom through them in their life. And give thanks to God for promoting them to the cloud of witnesses now, encouraging you each step of your own faith journey. That's what this is really about. This deeply religious holiday. Connection and love, life and death, the turning of the seasons, the trust we have in God for God's provision on both sides of the grave. It's in our bones. So do not be afraid, beloved. Perfect love casts out all fear, and love is from God. God is love. And darkness is as light to God anyway. Even the thick, dark corners of your life and mine. God dwells even there. So do not be afraid. And happy Halloween, saints. To God be all the glory. Amen.